By far the most prevalent technique used in attempting to achieve the objectives of the New Age is meditation. Sister Brahma Kumari Jayanti was one of the featured lecturers at this festival. She is the director of the London Raja Yoga Center, and she lectured on spiritual and meditative methods for bringing about world change in the New Age. What takes place during meditation?
It's a very beautiful experience, that's for sure. But we go through different levels of experience. For instance, the stage that everybody begins with, a stage where the energy of the mind is scattering in 1,000 different directions. That's normal, that's the way usually our mind works. But then in meditation, the intention is to channel that energy, to control the energy of the mind and focus it in one direction, towards the Supreme. You're seeing things on the scale of eternity. Another term for this would be to be looking at things with your third eye, because this is the location of the third eye, the awareness, the wisdom. The third eye is the eye of knowledge, the eye of the divine intellect.
The common denominator, there are several common denominators. Number one, it involves a force, not a personal God. Number two, it seems to all be centered in self. In other words, inner awareness, looking within ourselves, getting in touch with your higher self or your true self, not the personal God. It involves consciousness, different levels of consciousness. You're not to think of it rationally. For instance, I've asked people, well, if I'm getting in touch with myself, why am I not in touch with myself if it's really me, you know? Even if it's called a higher self.
I guess it's an experiential thing that people get put in touch with, and when you are in touch with that higher self, you often, life just falls into place and things work out really well, and you feel supported by just the universe.
Where does the higher self come from? Is it within each and every one of us?
I believe all of us have a higher self, and some people are in touch with that higher self and others aren't in touch with that higher self.
Why do I have to have somebody else's help or go into some particular state of consciousness to get in touch with what I'm really supposed to be already? And if this essence of all of us is all-knowing and all-good, why do we have so many problems in this world? And when I get to this point, I find people saying, well, now you're trying to be rational. You shouldn't be rational. You have to experience this. I say, for instance, to the Mahikari people who want me to experience a force. It involves a force, getting in line with the chakras and with some universal force. And I say, how can I don't want to buy a package at a store if I don't know what's inside the package, you know. So do you have something that will explain this a little better? And they say, well, no, you shouldn't. You can't be rational about it. You have to experience it first. And I say, well, that could be like jumping over a cliff, you know. You tell me just to jump and experience it first, but that could be the end.
You have healing powers within you? Is that how you heal?
Yeah.
Where do they come from?
I can tell. I took once a massage class, and my teacher told me I have this, and I started working on people, and I discovered it is really true. I have no idea where it comes from. It comes from a higher source. But I feel it. I feel this energy going through me.
Do you know what that higher source is?
You can call it God or the universal soul or whatever. You have just to learn to be able to tap into it. And
how does one learn to tap it?
Now, what they talk today in the Zen Center, is stilling yourself and knowing, kind of connecting to your higher self. I actually teach people how to do that, but I can't do that in a short.
Cheryl, you call yourself a clairvoyant. What is a clairvoyant?
I think it's always a person that has inner sixth sense, really, and just feels things without being able to really just... Anybody can look at cards and everything and read them, but you must have a feeling that goes with them, and therefore you get this inner sense, and the feelings from hands and the crystal is quite incredible.
Is this a spiritual power?
Yes, I think so.
The two main instructors, director Carl Totten and Bruce Eichelberger, are both master hypnotists as well. Once the group arrives, they begin their presentation by leading an energy flow exercise.
Extend your breathing down into your abdomen, real beneficial for the organs and for the energy flow, etc. In addition, when you're doing the exercises, I'd like you to take your tongue, we'll pretend this is a tongue, and curl it upward so that the tip of your tongue is resting against the roof of your mouth. I'd also like you to have your shoulders real relaxed. Use, if you know your musculature, use your deltoid muscles, not your trapezius muscles. About 3/4 of the way across, lift up your left hand. You're going to reach a position where your right hand is pointing at your left bicep. And then you come across together. Okay. Some of you are more visual than others and are picking this up. Some of you need to experience it. And basically they're designed to cultivate the ability to channel energy through the hands. Those of you who are having a specific sensation in your hands are having the sensation of energy moving through your hands. Because these exercises are very powerful in projecting that energy in that way. This is also exercises that are taught to martial arts students. As you can imagine, it's real useful to be able to put energy in your hands when you're doing martial arts. Okay. But also, the energy that's cultivated in the hands can be used for healing. My teacher emphasized using this energy in doing like aura balancing and in becoming aware of an additional sensitivity in the body.
Direct
I started practicing yoga and meditation even before the age of 5. And through my yoga and meditation practices, very often I used to experience a trance, journeys into other worlds where I would see mystical things, quote, the gods, and bright lights and bright colors, psychedelic movements. And it was fantastic, or so it seemed. And I was very proud of these many experiences I was having, because for the Hindu, the more you experience spiritually, the more divine you think you are. For the Hindu, the experiential is of utmost importance.
Bob and Kathy Story were instructors in TM for over a decade. Bob, what exactly is Transcendental Meditation?
Well, what it is, Dan, is a technique to relax oneself. It's a technique for deep relaxation.
What is the goal of this technique?
The goal of meditation is really to become a good Hindu. And it's the kind of program that is very scientific, and it has a lot of practical advantages to it, but this is how it's taught. But in essence, it's a technique that brings a person more into the occult, it brings a person more into these forces that are very difficult to deal with, and sometimes many people have had bad experiences from it.
I agree with him. You know, I had said before that I felt an initial surge of energy and vitality when I started TM, and it was a contrast of, you know, when you're out in a busy world, and even if you closed your eyes for 20 minutes twice a day, you'd feel better just from the rest. But as time started going on, I was getting spaced out. I was not progressing. I was just sort of standing still and vegetating. I didn't have the vitality and the energy and the life that I feel now.
Kathy, you've had some experiences in TM that you felt were not quite right. Could you tell me about them?
I was at MIU in Fairfield, Iowa, which is where we were living, getting my Maharishi International University. And I was getting my supernormal powers. And I was just with ladies. Maharishi always had it divided up, just ladies, just men, or couples. And when we would do our flying technique together, boy, I look back on it now, it's very strange. It would be like lots of sounds that would come out, yelling, and screaming. And I just remember sometimes opening my eyes and sometimes being a part of it. You know, a bunch of girls, we'd be hopping around the room just screaming our brains out. Very bizarre. But see, the thing that's so strange is we thought it was normal, because it was explained to us that this was release of stress. And the release of stress is a positive thing, because that's what leads you to enlightenment. So we accepted it just as a normal part of the program. People would speak in strange languages, intense emotions, people getting up, jumping up and down, yelling and screaming.
Now that you look back at it, what do you think was behind it?
It had to have been some other powers taking over, because I remember during the flying, the reason that I would be propelled in the air was this force of energy that would go up my spine and through my head. It would literally pick me up and throw me. I had no control over it.
Do you think it was demonic?
Absolutely.
The struggle begins. All went well for the first few minutes, but suddenly a very unpleasant feeling, something like an electric shock, passed through my body. Mr. Cream announced that we had just received the energy of power of the first ray, or the Father aspect of the Holy Trinity. Whatever it was so powerful I stopped breathing. Struggling to breathe, I discovered I could not move. Then, my heart seemed to stop. I thought, if I don't get out there, I'm going to die. But I was unable to communicate my problem to the people beside me. In the midst of this panic, I thought I heard someone say loudly, "Don't panic, you're leaning forward. Just lean back and slowly take in a breath of air, very slowly." I realized, as I followed the instructions, that I could move, but still, I wanted to leave the room. "You will be fine," said the voice that sounded very much like Cream's. Again he instructed me to relax and to breathe in slowly and deeply. Gradually my panic subsided and I was breathing normally again. Nevertheless, that forceful energy continued to pass through me to the extent that I was very uncomfortable and quite concerned about what it was doing to my body.
Saw this Ouija board and what you could do with it, and I found it absolutely fascinating. For the first time in my life it made sense to me that you can actually speak to dead people that come through and speak to you about the fact that there is no God and you're on your own when you die. Because we were Wiccans, we believed strongly that we could control the beings that came through the board. So often, one of these beings would follow me home, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night with this being sitting on my bed, looking at me, saying, "I'm still here, and I still want to talk to you." And 9 times out of 10, I would wake up in the middle of the night with an actual energetic hand around my neck. At some stage it got worse from there on, because then I didn't want to go out and work, so I made a deal with him and I said to him, "Why don't you possess me and then I don't have to feel?" this stage, it got to a point where I gave this demon permission to fully possess me. And we wanted to try out, he wanted to be in a physical body so that he could at least walk around in this world and just experience a physical body again. I wanted to switch off from the world. So it worked, it kind of was a deal that would benefit both of us. I felt him fully integrate into me, and I just sat there, and next thing I feel absolutely different. I'm still here, I can feel myself, but I also feel that there's another being inside of me.
There are horrible dangers, but the worst danger is spirit contact. And that's what this whole thing is designed for, to make contact with the spirit world, to pick up spirit guides. And I have talked with many people in yoga, have made contact with spirit entities that have led them down a horrendous path of evil and destruction. I remember a friend of mine who was one of the leading rebirthers. It's another way it comes in. They regress you back. It's in psychology and psychotherapy. And they regress you back and you relive this birthing process. And he became a Christian, and he said that after his observation of this whole New Age scene out there, he became convinced that these techniques were specifically designed to break open doors and knock down barriers that God has placed within us to prevent a demonic invasion. And of course that's what the whole pagan world is about.
One of the reasons the Judeo-Christian Bible warns against involvement with the occult, such as tantric yoga and meditation, is because it is said to open one up to spiritual deception by demonic powers whose very purpose is to lead people away from knowing the true God.
I relax, and I developed my own relaxation technique, which everyone would find for themselves to be unique. I relax, I raise my vibrational frequency by bringing my thoughts to thankfulness and joy and love and such higher thought form frequencies, as well as I visualize moving into a lighter and more refined vibration of existence. It's so I imagine light and refined feeling. And from there, I connect with my source, and this source I allow to blend with my energy. Of course, I'm familiar with this source, and I feel like I fill up with golden light. I feel like I'm filling up with golden light, and it's grounded right down to my feet. And they just start speaking from there. They speak through me. I step aside. And because I step aside, that is why I go into a trance state.
I just step aside. I just get out of the way. And it's possible that like a main portion of my energy body steps aside, leaving the portion that keeps the heart going and the lungs going and everything there. And then that part of Ajaron, or whoever is speaking, will come in and utilize my form.
That area of the spiritual realm that reach down to humankind, call them angelic beings, extraterrestrials, whatever, that reach down, they are available for us to channel from, to reach, to help guide our lives, to help us make this a better place so that we are more about the divine plan down here, the plan that was originally brought into being when life was brought about. And you can reach that realm and be guided to them by meditating.
There was a natural talent who didn't really know anything about me except I was a psychic. She doesn't know anything about channeling, she doesn't know from extraterrestrials, and at some point we were kind of like doing a meditation together, and suddenly she looked at me and she said, "You seem to have a veil all around you." And she continued looking. She says, no, it's not a veil. It's like a shower of light. And she starts looking up, and she goes, oh, my God. I say, what do you see? She proceeded to describe the three to me. Says, it's like they're in some sort of spaceship, but of course it's not a spaceship. She didn't want to, I'm sure, appear that she was like seeing things. And she says, there's these three beings. Each of them have a different thing they're supposed to do, but they do it together. And she's just looking up. And she says, and they seem to be different colors. Now, she didn't know anything about this.
Channeling has been known by a number of different names in different cultures over the centuries. But it next rears its head in a major way with the Victorians in the last century.
Alexander Blair Ewart, editor of Dimensions magazine, has studied the resurgence of channeling and its pagan beginnings.
Trance-channeling basically emerged in the mid-1800s when science had destroyed Western religion, essentially. Something that had been repressed for about 2,000 years, which was paganism, and earlier atavistic forms of religion came gushing to the surface. So suddenly you had this pagan approach to the spirit that had been repressed for a couple of thousand years and has suddenly floated to the surface.
We are a culture which is now what I would call rejecting many of the assumptions that we've lived with for the past 300 years. For example, the assumption that the rational is the only way of knowing truth. And so you have that being in some ways pushed aside, and people saying, no, that there are many other ways of finding truth. And one of those ways of finding truth is to connect with another reality, a spirit reality or a spiritual reality. And so there's a searching after that.
Traditional religion never did it for me. External authority never did it for me. I always felt there was something inside there that needed to come up to the surface. So I studied altered states of consciousness. One day a friend was leading me through a meditation, and I sensed an energy in the room. And to make a long story short, the energy was very loving, very benevolent, and I got a sense that it wanted to drop in to my body.
And this is really an introduction of what we would call a neo-paganism. It's a reintroduction into the West of beliefs that have been around for thousands upon thousands of years, that there are in fact spiritual entities and spiritual realities both in nature and outside of nature, and we can contact them. So I think all of that comes together at a time when people are very insecure, they're searching for direction, they want answers, they want certainty, but they feel all the old ways of giving answers are not appropriate. And so there are certain groups of people who are now wanting to tune in to spirits that can give them help and can give them direction.
Mike Mandel is a Canadian entertainer and lecturer. For many years, he was involved in various aspects of the occult, including spirit mediumship. Dozens of entities would speak through him on an ongoing basis.
I became involved in what is now known as channeling in the late 1960s. It was a spontaneous experience. We had been trying astral travel and a group of other techniques to let our spirits leave our bodies, to develop clairvoyant abilities, and so on. And when I say we, I mean a small group of us that had polarized together around an occult worldview. By trying these different techniques, I inadvertently opened myself up, and various entities began speaking through me, initially speaking in my head, and then eventually taking over to such a degree they were using my vocal cords and speaking through me to our friends.
Mike could literally be talking to you as I'm talking to you now, and instantly, in a moment, change and be taken over, and someone else would be talking. And his voice would literally stop being Mike and all of a sudden be somebody else.
Initially, it seemed to take them quite a bit of effort to take control of me. And it was more or less a voluntary thing. But as time passed, I realized that it was getting much, much easier for them to slip in and out. We used to call it someone popping in. We'd say, oh, so-and-so just popped in when you were gone. And they would appear sometimes for hours, sometimes for just a few minutes. And then we realized eventually that they were able to go in and out as they pleased by the end of things. And we asked one of the entities, someone asked on my behalf and said, why is it that you can get in and out of Mike's personality so readily? And they said something to the effect of, all human beings have a door that will keep other spirit beings out. And in most people's cases, the door is locked and barred and stapled shut and roped shut and sealed. And they said in my case, it was virtually hanging off the hinges.
They claimed to be distinctive entities. In other words, if they had a name, they would say their name. If they had a purpose or a distinctive, they would tell you that in many cases. But the range would range from very, what we call low-level life forms that really didn't seem to have any purpose except to be pranksters, that sort of thing, on up to through the sort of human range, right on up to the what you call ascended masters, the wise, benevolent, powerful type entities, and the antithesis of that, the evil, powerful, intelligent entities as well.
They claim to be ascended masters, highly advanced spirit beings, even on other planets, people on various astral planes who had reincarnated and then gone on to perfection, Tibetan Buddhists, people from the past. I mean, there was an entire realm of things that they called themselves. However, the common thread was they were all spiritually pure and were contacting our little group specifically to help us evolve spiritually.
Warder often witnessed strange occurrences. He feared the darker controlling entities, one of whom regularly threatened him with knives. Still, he was fascinated by the spirit's powers.
One evening when I was over at Mike's place, we were just sitting talking when all of a sudden one of the entities popped in and became visibly angry with, I think, primarily myself, and began ranting and raving. I can't remember the exact words he was saying, but he got up and sort of stormed off into the kitchen. My habit being to always follow Mike into the kitchen or anywhere where there were knives present, and so I was present, and so I just followed, but I was very concerned with what was going on. As I got to the doorway of the kitchen, Mike, quote, Mike was standing and had picked up 2 Coke bottles off the counter, 2 26-ounce Coke bottles, and held them both out in front of him and crushed them simultaneously, one in each hand. Then, unfortunately, Mike, the entity left, and Mike was not able to come back right away. And in that delay time, Mike fell forward into the broken glass, cutting his, I don't know if his hands were cut at that moment or when he actually crushed the bottles, but they were cut fairly badly. He was obviously in shock when he came back. I got him up, moved him to the couch in the living room, and again he was taken over, this time by another entity which seemed much gentler and more benevolent, and held out his hands in a very almost pathetic sort of way and said, "Do the wounds on my hands seem familiar to you?" And now we had an entity who was claiming to be or imitating Christ.
One of the things the entities used to do was they used to test us. It was as though we were being brainwashed. We'd be told to do something very bizarre immediately, or we'd be told to go at midnight to this certain forest that was very, very terrifying to us because there'd been a number of manifestations there. We'd be told to go alone there at midnight and stay there for an hour and then come home. And they were testing our readiness to respond immediately to their commands. And we were not to test them ever, because they always said proof comes to those who do not ask for it, which sounds vaguely biblical, but it isn't. And I recall one time, one of the entities was put to the test. One of the particular people in the group suddenly spoke to it in German. And the entity, without missing a beat, stopped its sentence with the other person, turned and addressed him in flawless German, and then turned back and continued the conversation. Well, none of us knew German. None of us had studied it at any time. But the entity was able to switch in and out of the other language immediately.
Famous mystic Emanuel Swedenborg spent an entire lifetime associating with the spirit world, yet he warned, when the spirits begin to speak with a man, he ought to beware that he believes nothing whatever from them, for they say almost anything. Things are fabricated by them, and they lie. They would tell so many lies, and indeed with solemn affirmation, that a man would be astonished. If a man listens and believes, they press on, and deceive and seduce in many ways.
I don't know what Ekton is. That's why I call him a non-physical personality. In my own meditations, I've met some personalities that are a little shady, you know, but nothing that I would consider demonic in a traditional religious sense.
The problem with mediumship is, perhaps the greatest common denominator, is it's very unnatural for people to turn over their personal sovereignty to another entity. When they do this, they don't know what they're picking up. They don't know who's speaking through them. There's no way that they can test what this voice is, what its source is. And as I've said, that usually, perhaps 99% of the time, if not more, that voice is there as a parasite, no more.
Author Dave Hunt, in his book America, The Sorcerer's New Apprentice, examines channeling.
Carl Jung, in his time, he said, no, these are depths of the psyche, but he came to believe that these are spirit beings. You can't escape it before his death. And he came to believe maybe, hey, they may not all be good. Maybe some of them are evil. So there are people who would say it's the wisdom of the universe, the ancient wisdom. Edgar Mitchell, one of our astronauts at the Institute of Nordic Sciences, which he founded, he would say that sort of thing. It's the ancient wisdom that, when you were back in Greek days, they consulted the oracle at Delphi. And there's some kind of a mysterious wisdom that's just built into our genes, into the collective consciousness or psyche of the human race. Others would say, no, these are ascended masters. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, who claims to channel Jesus and Buddha and so forth, she would say that. Others would say well, it used to be popular to say these are the spirits of the dead. There are a variety of explanations for this. My research indicates they're demons.
While researching mediumship, Western psychologist William James stated, "The refusal of modern enlightenment to treat possession as a hypothesis to be spoken of as even possible, in spite of the massive human experience in its favor, has always seemed to me a curious example of the power of fashion in things scientific." That the demon theory will have its innings again is to my mind absolutely certain. One has to be scientific indeed to be blind and ignorant enough to suspect no such possibility.
Well, they claim to be ascended masters, but in reality they were the exact opposite end of the spiritual scale. There's no question in my mind now that they were demon spirits. Then, I would have believed entirely that they were higher beings, a higher spiritual order of beings. I wouldn't have believed in demons. I didn't think they existed. I thought they were an invention of the Christian church. In retrospect now, I can see back with horrible clarity that they were malevolent, created, demonic spirits intent on our destruction.
Some of these entities out here will say, oh yeah, they're bad spirits and they're good spirits. In fact, the old mediums, before the channelers came along, it was a little more complicated. And the mediums would have a control. It was called a control spirit. And the function of the control spirit was to keep the bad spirits away and to kind of line things up, and make it work out as it should. And they would even say, oh, that was a lower entity.
In my own case, I recall that some of the entities we had to deal with were overtly violent, almost psychotic. And the others were pure and altruistic, and all they wanted to do was help us, and they would warn us about things that the nasty entities were doing, and they would give us teaching and methods of developing ourselves and so on. In retrospect, I'd like to say that all the entities were equally evil. It was the clever way it was presented by showing this group as overtly evil that made us more ready to accept these guys as the good guys. In reality, they were all in it together.
In evaluating the situation, the reason they appeared to be good or evil was to create a contrast and also to create further deception. It was obviously that the whole thing was an incredible deception, but it would have had no credibility if it was obvious as a deception.
Obviously what spirits do is warp people's perception of what reality is about. And I think one of the difficult things is that you are really dealing with people who are being duped is the best word I could say, and in that handing over of themselves to this power, in that handing over, they're going to see that as good stuff and not see that they are moving towards some very destructive things for themselves and for others.
All people who are channeling entities, whatever they say they are, Jesus Christ, Buddha, your Aunt Vera, whoever, they're not these pure, altruistic, beautiful beings that they seem to be. If you strip away the covering, you'll find a demon behind every one of these voices, behind every one of the spirits. In fact, one of their most clever ploys is to appear, as the Bible says, even Satan disguises as an angel of light. We're seeing these emissaries of evil that are dressing in the most wonderful packaging, so people are accepting them as genuine. People are seeing them as good and pure. And in reality, even the good ones are demon spirits.
Very clever and subtle manipulation.
St. Paul wrote, "Some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons." Proponents of channeling claim the identity of the spirits is unimportant. Information is all that matters. Truth is subjective. If it sounds right, accept it. Biblical writers warn that these unseen entities are in fact evil spirits, and the people who succumb to their teachings are ultimately deceived.
A mesmerizing hour of mystery, medicine, and maybe even miracles. Who is this man who calls himself John of God? And why do these people believe he's the greatest healer in 2,000 years? He says his work can cure those he touches. This actress with cancer.
I'm stepping into the unknown.
This attorney with Lou Gehrig's disease. This woman paralyzed in a car crash. What will happen to them and all the Americans we found making the pilgrimage to John of God? Who says he channels the spirits of more than 30 dead doctors. Tonight, we journey to Brazil, deep into the heart of faith, to see what really happens. Is it a miracle, a touch of madness, or is there a medical explanation?
Either he's a healer who's found some talents that he has innately within him and he can help people, or he's crazy.
Who is John of God?
Gente, o Senhor tem levado essa sua missão para o mundo inteiro e tem levado a mensagem da casa de Dom Inácio. Como é que o senhor vê o seu trabalho, o trabalho das entidades expandindo para o mundo?
Eu tinha vontade de ver, minha irmã, porque eu não sou consciente. Na hora que eu recebo a incorporação, eu estou dormindo. Então eu não sei o que se passa. Na hora eu recebo a incorporação, vêm os bons espíritos de Deus, pego o meu aparelho, faz o trabalho, eu não vejo nada. É a mesma coisa de você chegar em uma festa, vai para festar, você fica embriagado.
What does it feel like when the spirits come inside you or when they leave? Do you feel anything?
Dormir. Está dormindo. Sou inconsciente.
Do you experience the entities when you're not incorporated? Do you speak with them or have a connection with them?
Eu tenho evidência.
John of God, the psychic surgeon and healer, is advertised worldwide. Many mediums advertise healing tours there in numerous magazines such as Psychic News, Kindred Spirit, Caduceus. There are tours advertised on the internet, and I attended a video and lecture whilst in California. They encourage everyone throughout the world to go there and promise healing of all and every condition. So why are they encouraged to go en masse? This is for a reason that is the hidden agenda of John of God Healing. Their agenda is not just healing. It is increasing world belief in spirits. So foreigners are encouraged there for the purpose of making them believe in spirits. The healing of foreigners is not the objective, although undoubtedly some are healed. I was given no healing, and instead a pretense of healing was put on just to stop me crying. After this session still not healed, I confronted the cause that they had pretended my healing. This went down like a ton of bricks, and I was subjected to near-instant psychic attack. Thereafter I was made to feel very unwelcome. I still had a week of the tour left and had no choice but to stay. The Kaza obviously had methods to deter unwanted people from staying, a self-defense method that made the unwelcome guest extremely uncomfortable. I became guarded by spirits who appeared red and unpleasant. At one time I was taking a walk by myself and an entity attacked my heart and lung area. On completion of the tour I left for home extremely disappointed. John of God had identified a long-distance connection with a reptilian but had not removed it. As I was leaving the Kaza, an entity from the Kaza followed me home. How the entity from the John of God Healing treated me is absolutely diabolical. I went there for healing, and to join forces with a reptilian to harm me is disgraceful. The entity from there was far more powerful than the reptilian, so the John of God Psychic Surgery Center wrecked my life for a year.
In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my personal experience as a yoga instructor and how I realized that yoga is in fact a satanic spiritual practice that no one should be participating in. So 7 years ago, I started to experience depression and anxiety, and I went to a psychologist, and a lot of psychologists nowadays are utilizing New Age occult techniques for healing. Now, this is exactly what happened to me. My psychologist would talk to me about meditations that I could use for the anxiety and the depression, and especially yoga. So it wasn't long before I got involved with yoga, and I absolutely loved it. So I started an apprenticeship at my local yoga center in Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga means moon and sun, light and dark, male and female. The principle behind it is to balance these polarities within yourself. Now, this is a flawed spiritual concept that I'm going to talk about in future videos, but just to give you an idea, this is what I was involved with. And this is extremely occult and at its very core satanic. Now, what does yoga actually mean? Well, if you go to Google right now and you put yoga, the definition that's going to come up is a Hindu spiritual and aesthetic discipline, a part of which include breath control, simple meditation, and the adoption of bodily postures. So I want you to notice right there, it says a Hindu spiritual practice. So it finds its roots in false religion. Alright, so in my studies I had to study the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu spiritual text. And one thing also is to realize that each posture that you're doing when you do yoga is a posture of worship to a Hindu god. All right. So a lot of people, when they get involved with yoga, they don't have a clue about this. They're really clueless. You know, they're doing it very naively. But at its spiritual roots, this is it's based on false religion. So we shouldn't have anything to do with this. Now, one of the other things that I got heavily involved with is Kundalini Yoga. Now, Kundalini Yoga is the most satanic yoga that you can possibly find out there. It's basically, the philosophy is that there is a dormant spiritual serpent at the base of the spine, and you will go through a process of what they call the Kundalini awakening. In the Kundalini awakening, it's said that the Kundalini serpent will then climb up your spine and go through the chakra system until it reaches the pineal gland and the crown chakra, where you will then experience what's called God realization. So as the serpent climbs and reaches the top, and the third eye is called the eye of wisdom, it will then convince you that you are a god, because the final step in yoga is God realization. But this isn't true. This is like the deepest spiritual deception that a human being could ever bring about onto himself. So this is what happened to me. I went through what's called the Kundalini awakening. Now, not everyone goes through it the same way. I actually had some very devastating symptoms, and you can do your research on this. It's called Kundalini. If you Google Kundalini dangers, you're going to see that a lot of people experience physical, mental, and spiritual symptoms. I would be sitting there and getting vivid dreams and visions, and my stomach was in knots all the time, and I was having physiological pain, and I thought this was all part of the process, because if you read the spiritual text, they say, oh no, this is part of it, don't worry about it. Now, the reason that you're experiencing this is because you're opening yourself up to the demonic spirits. The Kundalini serpent is essentially a demonic spirit. It is Lucifer within yourself that you are now activating, and he is getting possession of your mind and your body and soul. Alright, come on, people. It's a serpent at the base of your spine. Do you want to be waking up the snake that's going to make you think you're a god? This is absolutely satanic, and we shouldn't have anything to do with this, or Kundalini awakening. Now, just to go through the concepts of Kundalini Yoga. Now, if you are going to have a Kundalini awakening, the best way to have it is going to see a guru. And the guru himself, what he'll do is, as I'm showing you on the screen, he's going to touch your forehead. This is called Shaktipat. And when it's practiced, he will transfer his spiritual energy into you. And a lot of people will then fall down. They're going to shake. Some bark like animals. Some laugh uncontrollably. These are the spiritual manifestations of the Kundalini spirit.
In bringing about a global transformation of consciousness, a change of beliefs, the transformation of our educational system is critical to New Age objectives. Programs of holistic and confluent education are being introduced into public school systems across the country. Techniques such as meditation, deep breathing, and visualization are being introduced as a part of the transformed curriculum. Dr. Beverly Gallienne is consultant to several U.S. school systems.
Getting the kids acclimated to when they first come in the classroom in the morning, having beautiful Baroque music or quiet music playing, so that when they come in from the noise and the cacophony of the street, they come into a very quiet, focused setting. And starting with neck rolls and acupressure techniques where you can massage quiet into your head. Just get a good sense and sharpen up your senses in your body. And doing some deep breathing, and then maybe holding hands with the kids in the class in a circle. This is for kids and adults of all ages. And while you're deep breathing, listening to the music, just letting the life energy in each person flow in a circular motion around the group and bring a balanced harmony to the key energy circulating around the group.
Some of these techniques that you're talking about, relaxing and breathing, are they really all that new?
They've been around for ages. They've been around for ages, but they have not been used in formal settings. And with the emphasis now on people are becoming smarter, we're no longer content to be sick, to be stupid, to be not knowing, to be controlled by forces outside of ourselves. And in our own innate desire to be in command of our own lives with our own internal wisdom, what's happening today is we're seeing a cataclysmic breakthrough in consciousness, that we're starting to seek out ways in which we can once again return to the gifts of our own nature, the harmony within ourselves. So deep breathing, taking in the life force, feeling the relaxation flowing through our bodies, beginning to become very acutely aware of our inner vibrations, our own visualization, our movement, our feelings. We're beginning to realize that as our sensory receptors become sharper, we are able to learn and take in much more information than we were in the past when we weren't using our own body systems.
Could you give us some specific examples of how these techniques are actually working with individual children?
Sure. Little kids who are language deficient, we call them ESL, English as a second language, or non-English limited English speaking. They're super to work with because these kids have very severe problems in both Spanish and English, or Vietnamese and English, whatever the language is, Korean and English. And so we do a lot of dance and movement and imagination activities with the kids. And in this one particular activity, one of my teachers taught her kids how to travel inside their body. And they would look inside their body and see what was there to see. Inside of me is, and then they'd open their eyes and they'd say, and outside of me is. So they could continually get a balance between going within their own being and be very sensitive to their own inner vibrations, as well as the outside. Now, we did this in conjunction with the regular language arts program. So see, we're bringing these activities in confluently, which means all we're doing is teaching the old curriculum in a brand new way. So we can teach the kids these new mind skills, these new body skills, so that when they grow up, they can learn how to access these inner skills, and gradually these new mind skills will become the curriculum of the future. Direct access to mental powers.
Do you see that happening?
Yes, it's happening already. Our kids are already tuned into it, and that's why you have the E.T. generation, the Star Wars generation. When you say, may the Force be with you, kids have an intuitive sense that that means there's a higher power flowing through us. So let's get on and really work with it. So in this activity, the kids do this, and they close their eyes and they create a picture of the love in their heart. Sometimes it's a fire, a flame, could be a symbol of a heart, red, whatever. And they take all the love out of their heart and they feel it in their hands and they make a love ball. And if you watch the little children doing this, they're totally focused on it. And then they pack all this love energy in their hands. And then we have them feel and tap each other's hands to feel the love energy coming off. And of course, we know from the energy flow in the human body, the energy does flow off the hands. So what we're really doing is saying, here is a better way to teach what you already need to teach. And while you're teaching the old, here are some new things you can also teach. So we really bridge the two worlds. And what the kids are doing is, the kids are responding extremely well to the activities because the kids are already there. We live in a visually literate society. We're living in a society where kids are very interested in things such as mysticism, psychic phenomena, out of mind, out of body experiences, because they're born with that kind of sense that this seems to be where energy flow is going.
There is the holistic education network that is all over the United States. It's based upon the belief that we are all divine, that children need to be educated spiritually, they need to get in touch with their higher self. Now, there may be some parents who would be in favor of this, but I think many parents would be concerned if they knew that people who were basically into witchcraft or shamanism were educating the spirits and souls and tinkering around with the minds of their children in public schools in the name of science and the latest educational techniques.
We decided to look more closely at the ways that New Age thinking is influencing our children outside of the classroom. With me is Don Hancock, co-producer on this project. And Don, I know this is an area of great concern for you, being the father of 2 young children.
Yes, it is, Dan, because one of the things that we've noticed is that it's starting at a very early age. The Saturday morning cartoons, the influence, E.T. and Star Wars have been mentioned several times already. They are making a sense that out-of-body experience, the mystical experience, is normal. It's the norm, not the exception. And so we found a lot of books, we found a television program, we found exercises for parents to do with children that all lead them into this same area.
That's right, Don, and Bev Gallian mentioned earlier that our children are growing up in a very visual society. And we discovered that there are television programs being produced which contain much of the New Age thinking in it. We have a clip of a program that was produced by the Olive Garvey Center for the Improvement of Human Functioning out of Wichita, Kansas.
Gosh, there's no one around today. Troubadour and Cool Cat went on a picnic, and Carla and the Wise Woman went to play tennis. Anyway, everybody's gone. There's no one to have fun with. Beth, I'm tired of you forgetting about me. After all, I am your best friend. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Oh, that's okay. When there's no one around, though, make your own fun. You can do anything in your mind.
So tell me, my son, how is your meditation?
Huh? Well, to be honest, it is not easy. I find myself getting easily distracted by indulging in all kind of thoughts, like winning the Cartoon World Cup or shagging Betty Boop. It almost seems that my mind gets more wild when I am trying to meditate.
I see. That is all right, my son. First of all, it would be weird if you would not be distracted. Getting distracted is our habit for incalculable exhibits. I can reassure you that this is actually a good sign. Far from meaning that your thoughts have become wilder, it shows that you have become quieter, and you are finally aware of just how noisy your thoughts have always been.
Yes. The stage that everybody begins with, a stage where the energy of the mind is scattering in 1,000 different directions. That's normal, that's the way usually our mind works. But then in meditation, the intention is to channel that energy, to control the energy of the mind and focus it in one direction, towards the Supreme.
Welcome to Flatland, a world of only 2 dimensions. Only forwards and backwards, left and right. In this world, there is no up and no down.
I said to Ray, where's Dottie? He said, well, she's out in line.
What the bleep is that thing? In this world, the 2-dimensional beings that live here have no concept of 3-dimensional objects. These 2-dimensional flatlanders have no understanding of cubes, spheres, tetrahedrons, or yours truly. From their 2D perspective, my 3D finger looks something like this.
What the planet is that?
Hello, little circle. Fear of the unknown. Or should I say, not yet known. It's a puzzle. If we see only what we know, how does anyone ever see anything new? The unknown. How do we ever get out of our box? Hello, little circle. Don't be afraid.
Who said that? Where are you?
This is always the tricky part to explain. I'm in another dimension, another space. I am above you.
Never use that word.
What word?
The A word.
Above?
It's forbidden.
Well, what do you think it means?
I don't know. And I don't want to know. You can be severely punished if you use that word. Are you a ghost?
I hope not. I just have a different perspective than you do. I can see things in a way you can't yet.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, okay, you have a safe hidden in your pantry. And inside it, you have 12 coins, a will, and a passport.
How did you know that? What are you? Are you a god?
Well, no more than you. You see, since I am above you, in the third dimension, I can see inside things in your world.
Third dimension? You are a crazy ghost. There's only two. Look.
So, if I were to touch the inside of your stomach, how would I do that?
Well, you'd have to cut through my skin. Otherwise, it's impossible. Stop! Stop!
Ready for more?
More what?
Dimensions.
Oh.
Directions.
No. Yes. But there aren't any. More? What will happen to me? What will I become?
You'd have to become it to know.
Okay.
Excellent.
I never knew.
Come shop till you drop here at Giga Plus. The best prices are here, huh?
Mister, can you help me?
Sure, little girl. Are you lost?
Nope. I'm in exactly the right place.
Ow!
Mister? I think I'm lost.
Cosmo Creeps that way, kid. I'm busy.
No! Let me go! Amy! Please, Amy, open your eyes for me.
Stop interfering with my plans or you'll never leave this castle!
No, I'm sorry.
How about now? It's just one little kiss.
Okay. Just one.
It's truly amazing. You look just like her. Sound like her.
I am her. I even have her memories.
You really are a cannibal.
I prefer the term.
Whatever. So now you're a woman. How does it feel?
I've always wanted to be with a woman like this. Now I am a woman like this.
I think I'll put it to work for me. You ought to be flattered, girl. I don't hit just anyone with my mind transfer jutsu. Letting me hang out in your soul for a bit, even if it is a little cramped in here. Now, I've got to memorize these answers quick, so I can pass them on to Choji and Shikamaru. Hi. ありがとう、天使のお姉ちゃん。天使。すごい。さすがだね、ヤミちゃん。かっこいい。いい 私もトランス使ってみたいな。みかんがですか？ヤミさんと体を交換できたらいいんだけどね。ってそんなの無理か。